Well, hello there. My name is Father Kyle Digman. I'm the Associate Pastor at Holy Spirit Parish. For the next few weeks, we're going to be talking about the season of Advent, because there are a lot of things about the season of Advent that we might not know, or things that we might have questions about. So please join us for these 4 episodes talking about the season of Advent. Well, welcome to week 1 of our first discussion of this season of Advent. The first thing I'd like to discuss is the Advent wreath. Now, a lot of people have different ideas about what the Advent wreath is all about and how long it dates back, and so many people think that the Advent wreath is something like the Christmas wreath, or it dated back to sometime in the 3rd century, 4th century, or something like that. But that's not true. It's actually pretty new compared to most of the traditions in the Catholic Church. So the Advent wreath actually dates back to the 19th century in Germany, and as we know, many great things come from Germany. Other great things from Germany include the pastor here at Holy Spirit Parish, Father Dwayne Toman, bratwurst, which is a delicious food, and the Associate Pastor Emeritus, Father Alan Dietzenbach. So the Advent wreath itself is comprised of a number of different things, but 2 things in particular. First is the evergreen ring that goes around the outside, and second are the candles that are on top of that ring. The ring itself represents 2 different things for us. It's circular, so it represents eternity, without beginning or end. And so we remind ourselves of God who is eternal, who is without beginning and without end. It also reminds us of our own soul, which is immortal and eternal. That just as our physical body may pass away on earth, that our soul is immortal and goes on for all eternity. And so as we celebrate the season of Advent, we have to keep in mind these 2 things: the eternity of God without beginning or end, and the eternity and immortality of our soul that lives on even past our earthly death. The green of the Advent wreath, specifically the evergreen in the circle, reminds us of that life and that fruitfulness that Christ brings into our life, even though it's in the midst of winter. Advent season, coming up to the coming of Christmas and Christ during Christmas, is a cold time outside, not much vegetation or life. But the evergreen reminds us that even in the winter and the desert of our lives, that Christ brings life and fruitfulness to our lives. The second thing we see on the wreath are the 4 candles. And these 4 candles all represent different things in the Advent season. In particular, they represent the 4 weeks in the season of Advent. And so we see the 4 candles representing those 4 weeks in preparation for Christmas and in anticipation of the coming of Christ. Now, if you look up on Wikipedia the Advent wreath, you'll find a picture of a circular wreath of evergreen, but inside it you'll see 4 red candles. So I know it might be a great surprise to you, but sometimes Wikipedia is wrong. The Advent wreath is actually made up of 4 candles of different colors, 3 of them purple and 1 of them rose-colored. Sometimes on an Advent wreath, you'll find a 5th candle, a white candle placed in the center. And so that would be placed there on Christmas to remind us of the coming of Christ, the purity of that white candle into our lives. The 4 candles on the Advent wreath represent 4 different things for the 4 different weeks in Advent. The first candle represents hope. And so we have hope in the coming of Christ into our lives, which illumines that first candle. The second candle represents love, and so we know, of course, that Christ brings love into our hearts, love into our families, and love into our lives. The third candle is rose-colored and represents Gaudete, or rejoicing, and so the 3rd week in Advent is referred to as Gaudete Sunday. We'll talk more about Gaudete Sunday and what that means later, but for now just know that it means rejoicing, and that 3rd week in Advent is a time for great rejoicing in our season. The 4th candle represents peace. We know that Jesus himself is the Prince of Peace. And so as we invite Christ into our lives, we know we are also inviting peace into our lives. Also, as the candles are lit each week throughout the season of Advent, they bring more light into the space. And so 1 candle is lit at the beginning of Advent, but by the end of the season, all 4 candles are lit. Christ himself is the light of the world, and so as we prepare for Christ's coming, we see more light being illumined on the Advent wreath, which reminds us as we get closer to Christmas time and to the coming of Christ himself, the closer we get to being illumined fully with Christ's light in our lives.